coming back, but I just want to extend my gratitude to the Maston Park area breakout group. My brain and being is just enriched by
Wow.
what we just went through.
Yeah, we also had a lot of great conversation in the Delavan Grider group. Really uh, moving conversation for sure. Yeah, it's been a beautiful day altogether. Definitely a very interactive and experience and emotional and also transparent experience. So thank you all. Yeah.
I want to just check and see if we have all the groups back. Are we missing? I see Syra. I see Tyra. I see Brittany. So I think that we've probably got all of the groups back. And I can't thank Wakanda Alliance enough for kind of helping us reach this space in our day and thinking about the work that is possible, about what we can dismantle and around what we can build. Most importantly, I think that we very often don't create enough time to think about what is possible, and it takes so long to build something. Thinking decades out in some cases. This is really inspiring about where we're going. Oh, I'm not sure what that is, but it sounded nice. So I think what we're going to try to do, and Gio kind of started us in this space, which is really to think about kind of having each group, having gone through a number of sessions through the day, report out a little bit on high-level observations. And Oz, I'm going to put you on the spot for our at-large group, but we're going to go last. So I'm not sure who's been identified for, and the names for these groups are kind of arbitrary because we know that many neighborhoods were included in each of these spaces. But for, I'm not sure who's reporting out for Maston Park, but what are the important projects that we really need to, or are there things that we need to work on over the next short-term period in order to move and support the community now? And what are the big items that we really need to tackle if we're going to be really changing and supporting neighborhoods over a longer period of time? So I don't know who's identified for Maston.
I am. My name's Drew Canfield.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say we talked a lot about how to improve and uplift the housing stock in the Maston area without displacing people. So I think that's like the big kind of focus that we tended to have in our conversations. We talked about the Top Enterprise Inc. project happening at Jefferson and Best a lot, and they're working on housing and like a community space and things like that. So a lot of what we talked about there was how to connect the community to existing resources through that space. We also talked about how it seems like a lot of projects are happening in isolation, and we really want to see a comprehensive like neighborhood plan go into action so that these projects can have a catalytic effect and that they're not just these isolated projects that end up not being as transformative as maybe they could be if they were more coordinated among agencies and with a community-driven plan.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone from Broadway Fillmore.
All right. So we had a quiet group, but we had fun. We really used the comment section. So I was the moderator, or the creative Afrofuturist. But some of the things that we came up with, we talked about like light rail and improving transit, and we talked about solar bikes, talked about all of the neighborhoods either getting their own land trusts and then using them however they wanted to, not necessarily for housing. An idea we came up with was having unique forms of solar panels that would connect with So instead of just having like a playground, maybe the playground is centered around solar panels, and then having them connect with programs where kids would learn how to make robots or do coding, and then connect it to the solar panels that are at the parks or whatnot. So they learn how to use those in different and new and innovative ways. And we talked about rain gardens. I think there's a rain garden on top of the central terminal, and I think they said 320,000 gallons of water. So we talked about what if we did that 10 times over around the whole city, and also introducing native plants that have been lost or that are dying out, having those come in. And then if I'm Black Panther, then I need an Everett Ross. So my man Sam, he's a note taker. If you could give some of the ideas that I missed.
Yeah. Some of the throughout all of the breakout sessions, some of the common themes that kept coming up were talking about how the idea that place-based expertise is better than planning expertise was a really, really common sentiment, and the idea that plans aren't going to really get much done if they're not working with the community to determine what they need and how to best pursue development and planning objectives. Another common and important aspect that our group talked about a lot was the idea that we need to have intergenerational planning so that youth are interlinked with working age adults, are interlinked with elderly, so that there's this whole social network that spans across generations, so that no one's left out of the loop in terms of communications. Everyone's clued in. Older generations can help the younger generations, and younger generations can help the older generations, both through transferring knowledge and coming up with new ideas, or bringing back older ideas that were lost, and just coming up with a combined framework that suits all residents equally. Unless I missed anything, I think those were the major grounding principles that guided our discussions in the breakout sessions.
And we talked about our own Kamoyo beads, and so we already have like the Apple Watch and Fitbit, and so we really were trying to push different ideas. There was intergenerational, like Sam was saying, Life Center that Pastor Patricia was talking about, and so we were really looking at big ideas and trying to bring them back into, like Sam was saying, how do we bring it back into that the community is an active part of it? So we're not just giving them something or giving them a present, but they're actually growing with it. And also talked about fixing our sewage system. So having them do training now, and training the citizens of Buffalo now, and then paying us to change our sewer system, and then us being a beacon for other cities to follow us, and they can learn from us and do what we do. But definitely want to give snaps to Sam and everybody that was in the Broadway Fillmore group.
Thank you. Who did I miss? Yeah, I think the Northland kind of Del Grider section of town. That was the third grade breakout group.
That'd be us. Hello,
Hi.
good morning.
Go for it.
Okay, and I'm here. So yes, we in one of our first conversations, we looked at the map that Lisk had started working on as far as the assets go and all the prominent projects going on in the city, and addressed what could be improved on the map, as far as separating things like, for example, I believe the categories are kind of broad, so we had to work out how to split those categories, like taking something like creative space and turning it into, okay, a category for art, a category for recreation. So that was one of the conversations we had about developing that. We also talked about how Fillmore is being ripped up right now. We thought about what should go there, and if there's proper communication between the developers and the people in the community as far as the business owners, and what type of task force, or if the task force who was part of that, if they did the proper outreach they needed to do in order to get the proper response from the community. We also talked about elders being more involved with technology and how we can get them more updated and up to speed on how they could utilize these resources so they're not left out of the conversation, and making sure they're not othered in the conversation when it comes to building up the community. And then that was part of the second one. And then for the third most recent conversation, we talked about a whole slew of things. We talked about how economics and teaching economics doesn't just fall on the responsibility of the family unit, but also on the educational side, and how there needs to be more of a connection between the family unit and the scholastic structure, where the teachers understand that there needs to be some more conversations about it. And now they can start to look for resources and programs that are out there, because they're out there right now, but they're not being implicated in the proper way to make sure that the youth are being educated about how to use their credit properly, how to spend their money wisely and efficiently. From there, we got onto the topic of mental health and why there's such disparages, especially with the Black community, and how we can address that by having the Black community build those structures for addressing mental health, because for so long we were left out of the picture. And but yet and still, we have a lot of people who are, a lot of young people in my generation and before, who are now more familiar with what mental health is and how it can be changed, because they have things like the internet, and they have artists, musicians who are talking about their mental health, and celebrities who are talking about their mental health. And now it's more access to that knowledge, and now we can start to build the frameworks for how it's shaped in addressing that when it comes to the future, and when it comes to addressing issues within the Black community specifically, things like racism, trauma initiated by racism, trauma initiated by gang violence, and trauma initiated by being in poverty just in general. And then from there, we got onto a really passionate subject about how communities should be shaped around farms, and how the jobs can be created around farms, if people have access to food, if people have access to the proper housing. Now people feel a little more comfortable in their setting, and now they can start to really do better for their community. They can see something like being an engineer, they can see something like being a teacher, and then they can just pass on that knowledge and keep that knowledge going. And then something that was constant throughout all three meetings were being able to report what we're doing here in the LIST Summit, and then passing that on to another family. Rita explained, just kind of explained, gave us some imagery about how she feels like she's reaching toward the front and she's reaching towards the back, and she's pulling another person, another family unit up with her. So we talked about how the sharing a communal space, not just physically, but also virtually, now that we have this Zoom, now that more people are familiar with Zoom, now they can start to facilitate common spaces where people can talk about what needs to be done in the community. And they'll do it comfortably because they're in their house, they got the shoes on, I got my slippers on. So, I feel really comfortable being in this setting and being able to talk about these things that are going on in the community, and now start to build solutions in addressing those issues. So very good job, Delvin Grader group.
Thank you. I want to ask, well done. So there was a catch-all group, and I'm going to ask maybe both Oz, Waldo, and John and or Angelina to report out. Who wants to go first?
I'm curious what Oz has to say.
I was waiting for you, John. Great session. I'll just start off, and I know John's going to finish this off well. Many of the themes that have been talked about in some of the other groups was talked about. We definitely talked about the intergenerational aspect that encompassed communities and how we looked at neighborhoods. We also went to some real specific examples and talked about Humboldt Parkway or the 33, and how the obvious aspect of it is how it cut a community, but even transportation, but how it did so much more. When we envision the storytelling, or we envision how communities and how people communicated with each other, or how it cut a neighborhood of, more affluent, people of color and homes, and how it benefited a group of folks that said, I can just drive right through Buffalo not even wave at folks, Buffalonians, but go straight in and go straight out. And the effects of that now. We also had a good conversation about housing and universal design. And that spoke to a little bit about the intergenerational aspect, but about envisioning not just your homes, but mindsets of folks who feel like they want to have better. And we gave some real specific examples. We talked about intergenerational group. Our group was very intergenerational. And we talked about, envisioning back to how we grew up. Some of us grew up understanding what projects were because we lived in it. And we spoke about that, but we spoke about the good aspects of it, the communal aspect of it, and how we helped each other, and how do we create neighborhoods that way too. We also talked about not forgetting about parks and these equitable spaces too, and how that brings about something, into a community too, which led to climate and climate, not just opportunities, but again, thinking about housing and those things too. So, and I think I'll leave off to saying that Robert Moses is a bad name that we'll never ever say ever again, so, and me personally, we just need to come up with a better term than urban renewal. And lastly here, I know we talk about empowering people. I just want to give you a new vocabulary. We need to equip people. Empowering is good, but equipping, because if you equip them, they'll be empowered, and they won't need somebody to do that for them, so John?
I think you really summarized it well. I appreciated that we at moments had some storytelling and people sharing a lot of themselves. And really we envisioned a Buffalo where, that was how Buffalo was before, basically without the racism, right? Let's bring back this wonderful park system that existed before, repair the damage that was done, and create a housing system that does rebuild public housing and offers the type of neighborhoods that a lot of folks have grown up in that were intergenerational. And it's interesting to me that before a lot of these other factors in the real estate market came in, people naturally decided and created intergenerational spaces, and architecture and other things followed that. So a lot of our conversation was about what we need to bring back, which I think is such an important space to get to. And I would love to continue talking to all these folks about how do we go from what we need to bring back to how we add in modern technology and a vision of the future. But it was a really beautiful group, and I really appreciated everybody who was in it and all they added to it. And I just want to name before I stop talking that, to me, doing climate change work, I believe that Buffalo is the most valuable land on the planet. And that when we get into the next 30 years of what is going to happen, and not just to our political system, but what's going on with the earth, we really need to protect our ability to stay on this land because we're going to need it, and a lot of other folks are too. And again, really appreciate everyone here for just sharing and being inspired and stimulating other people's minds, and hopefully we'll get to continue this work.
Thank you so much.
Julie, real quick, could I say one thing?
Absolutely, yeah.
So one thing that came up that I thought was interesting, and I don't think I heard it in the other groups, we also talked about reparations in a more holistic way. And so not just giving people land, but giving them land, giving them assets in the forms of stocks, bonds, life insurance, also giving them education, and also giving them access to a mental health counselor to get over the trauma, the generational trauma that just came from when our ancestors were first brought to this country. And then also the idea of if we have all this money, and Buffalo being the one of the most segregated cities in the country, that we do a truth and reconciliation commission, kind of like Nelson Mandela did in South Africa. And so I thought that those were less with building, but if we're going to talk about, we have this vast resource of money, that vibranium money, that there are definitely many creative things that we can do with it. Thank you.
No. Does anyone else have any? I want to invite anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, who has something that's really kind of critical to them that hasn't been voiced. This is a good moment to just kind of create that space, or else if you want to drop it in the chat. I'm going to do a little housekeeping now, which is always just an awkward transition, but I think that there's been some very, very rich conversation today, and a lot of people being very vulnerable, to be quite honest. we've got a lot of pain and trauma within our community and in between communities and individuals. That is largely structural and institutional that some of us have inherited, but everyone has had to kind of live through. And so, and I apologize, I'm going fast, and I can always be more articulate and intentional around language. This is just for us at least the start of what, and is one more step along a pathway of relationship with neighborhoods and community members and individuals from the city and the county have been here throughout the day. I think that we both are looking at how we work with institutions and places and people. And so this is really, we all need to navigate this space together, but it's a wonderful opportunity for us in this moment to really think boldly around how we can support one another, how we can reach our full potential as a community in terms of being a beacon in a time of climate change and in pandemic and in injustice, to really do something different. I think Buffalo was a very innovative and creative city. We helped and in many, many ways, everything from the Niagara movement to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, to women's rights and the, electricity. And so the Wakanda Alliance, gives us a pathway or, a narrative to consider going forward.